Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. Today, we have David Booher on the podcast to chat specs, amongst other things, including National Treasure, interior design, Stephen King, speculation market, and so much more. Before we get started, though, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our website, capesandtights.com, as well as Spotify, Apple, and all your major podcasting platforms. Be sure to review us and rate us on Apple 5 stars, please. And again, visit capesandtights.com for a lot more information, news, articles, reviews, and so much more. But this is episode 75 with David Booher talking specs over at Boom Studios. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, David. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing wonderful. New year, right? We're going to crush 2023.
I mean, I look back and I'm like, how are we already 9 days into 2023? It's absolutely nuts. But what isn't, speaking of nuts.
Yeah, exactly. We just talked about nuts.
We just were off camera. We were just talking about it. But what is really nuts is that background. Just absolutely spectacular.
I try.
I was noting the track lighting before we came on the camera and or on the recording, and you said that it's on the internet, tells you how to do these things, and yes. That blew my mind. It blew my mind.
There's a light here. There's a light here that are like $25 for the pair on the internet. I'm not gonna say what website I got them from. And then another light, but like that stuff right there, that having the little bit of light behind you, I guess, pops off things well. And I do what I have to, and this is a small, low budget, but yeah, it looks good. This used to light up.
As soon as you popped on the screen, it was like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark for me, and my face just like melted off.
I mean, at least you have a nice background. I have talked to people where they're like, "Oh man, you do not want to see what's behind me."
Oh, this is fake. This is fake. No, I'm just kidding. It's real. It's real.
That would be unbelievable if you actually took a photo like that.
And just put it on there. That would be funny if I took a photo exactly of this framing, like it's fake, and it is fake, and then I turn it off and it's the same.
Like the same.
That would be fun.
People would be like, Inception over here.
I know this is a comics podcast, but I'm really digging the interior design talk right now. Yes. I love it.
And this is also, I like to give away my secrets. I don't have a problem with my secrets. This is not an actual brick wall, people. This is a backdrop that I bought on the internet too. It's a white wall behind there, but I hated them too much white, so I put a brick backdrop on there. So that's an actual brick wall. If you look up, you can't see it, but up top there's a white wall. So
if you push one of the discolored bricks, does it open?
I wish. It'd be great. My wife and I love National Treasure, so it would be like a National Treasure thing, like a brick that would remove that these glasses are in, so we could see each other in.
So you could read You could read the secret message on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Never talked about this ever on the podcast. And we were talking about X-ray specs on an actual episode that has a comic book about X-ray specs. That's weird. That was not planned, people. I swear.
That was 100% not planned. But yes, secret magic glasses that let you read the clues to lead you with Nicolas Cage.
Yes.
And was it, who was Justin from The Hangover?
Yeah, it's Justin Bartha, or Riley Poole is his name on the movie. Justin
I can't
Bartha.
believe you just pulled his name right out.
Okay, so my wife, we did an episode, and this is something that, obviously, we did an episode, my wife and I, one of the first movies we ever like really fell in love with together, or I loved it and she loved it, and we kind of like said it was our guilty pleasure movie. It was National Treasure. We actually have a National Treasure poster in our hallway that's she got for me for my birthday, which is created of all these small little squares, a mosaic of all pictures of us that makes up the National Treasure 1 poster with Nicolas Cage on it. Yeah.
So you have found your treasures, which is each other.
Yeah, and I actually said that she was my National Treasure in our vows.
Oh my God. This is a deep and wide love for National Treasure. I have to tell you, I love the movie, I love both movies. Yeah. I haven't watched the show yet, but I just love the franchise. If I ever got the chance, I really would. I'm a huge Goonies fan. I love Goonies. And it's that treasure hunting, like what is out there hiding right in plain sight. And I would love to one day do I really want it to be a movie, but it could be a comic book. But to write the story of there's this rich guy who created this treasure hunt. Have you ever heard of this? I can't remember who he is.
Yeah.
And he buried treasure in like the I forget if it was like Colorado or Montana.
I think
or
it was
somewhere like
Colorado.
that.
Yeah, that area. Yeah.
And somebody actually found it, but he left clues. And I just thought, what a cool story it would be if somebody, some treasure hunter went and disappeared, and then they had like an adult child who doesn't care about the
Yeah.
treasure, but has to go find out what happened to their parent, and in the process finds the treasure, but then realizes, the real treasure is the friends we made along the way. No,
Yes.
the relationship that they sort of lost and refound. So I would love to one day do a modern treasure hunting National Treasure / Goonies. So let's go. Let's do it.
Well, the Goonies thing is funny. Is I've always loved Indiana Jones and National Treasure, like I mentioned. My wife actually got me to watch, and there's no reason why, but I had never seen the Goonies until 2019, 2018. And she's like, "Oh, I have a friend of mine who owns a place in downtown that it's got 2 theaters, but you can bring your own movies. So you just rent the space. It's got a bigger screen. So he doesn't actually rent the movies out to you. So it's basically you're renting the space and you can play video games or movies or whatever."
That's
and so
cool.
we brought the DVD. She had the DVD. We brought it and watched it there. And I was like, I don't know why it took me. I'm 36 years old, and it took me like 30 years to watch this movie for some weird reason. And now, yes, I can understand what I was missing with the Goonies.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah,
Did you enjoy
very
it?
much.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Justin, are you choosing violence right now, or did you like the
Yes.
movie?
Yes. Well,
Those are the
it's funny. It's like,
choices.
yeah. Oh, and I absolutely hated it. No. It
Oh,
was great. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great movie. Again, it's one of those movies that always, I mean, there's, how it is. There's thousands of movies to watch. And for some reason, it always just dropped down on the list. Something
I
else
have
came out
to.
that was new.
I
You're good.
forgot. I'm gonna grab something right now on the back of my computer because I forgot I had it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bottle. It's a
Bottle
soda
opener.
bottle
Yeah.
opener because it's a kids movie.
But
But
yeah,
I just had that laying around. I thought that's
that's awesome.
what a coincidence. Now this is a treasure hunting. It went from interior decorating to treasure
Treasure
hunting.
hunting.
What's the next big?
But
What's the
that's the
next
thing
big
about
topic?
podcasts that I love. And it's like the difference between if you were like on this to promote specs, and Boom was like, you need to have these 3 things you need to talk about, and da, da, da. On a radio show, it would be different. You'd have to like, no, we have a finite amount of time. We need to promote the book and move on. With a
You
podcast,
have
it's
3
like
minutes.
literally you can
3 minutes
talk
and you're
about
up.
whatever you want to talk about with 3 minutes somewhere in there talking about your comic book, and it
There you
would do
go.
well. But no, so reining it back in, let's just talk about how you got into comic book like reading and collecting I'm guessing it was as a child.
You would be guessing wrong.
Okay.
So I was thinking about this morning, actually. I used to, when I first started getting into comics, I used to say I came to comics late. And I reflected on that and I realized that's wrong because that suggests that there is a right time to come into comics and a wrong time. And even though I did not come to comics as we know them, comics, the single issue, go to your Wednesday, or even graphic novels, until I was an adult, even that's not really correct because I had a subscription to Mad Magazine. I read Far Side when I was a kid and loved it. So those are comics. Those are cartoons. Those are comics. Those all fall under the umbrella. So I didn't read the traditional what we think of as comics when I was a kid, but was exposed to comic storytelling, especially Mad Magazine. I used to get it as a kid in the late 80s, early 90s, and they would, when it comes, I don't know if you know this, but when it comes to as a subscription, when it came to your house, it would come in a brown wrapper. And sometimes the brown wrapper would have like Mad on it, and it would have like printed drawings by Sergio Aragonés or one of the other great artists. So coming into comics as an adult in this sort of comic shop world, my entry was through San Diego Comic-Con. So I've been going to San Diego Comic-Con for probably since the mid oh gosh, mid-aughts. So I think my first Comic-Con was 2000, I don't know, I'm so old now, 2007, 2008, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. But I came for TV and film. I wasn't really that, I knew comics that it existed, but I wasn't really into them. And then I started getting more interested in them as I was going to the convention. And eventually I picked up this comic book called Lock and Key by Joe Hill. I'm sure you and most of the listeners have heard of that one. And Gabe Rodriguez is the artist on it. It was, since I hadn't had a lot of experience with comics, it showed me, it's my favorite comic of all time. And it showed me what is capable, what comics is capable of, what kind of stories that you can tell. And it was so far beyond anything that I had ever seen before. And so I picked it up, and then I thought very naively, of course, it's like, I think I could do this. I could do this. And of course it took me 15 years to figure out how to do it. But yeah, so I picked up Lock and Key, and that inspired me. And then in a very fun full circle, 10 years after I picked up Lock and Key, I think I picked up in like 2010 or something, I got the chance to work with Joe to adapt one of his novellas in a book that he published in 2017 called Strange Weather. And one of the novellas was Rain. And it's a story about these two women who are moving in together to start their lives together in Boulder, Colorado. And the skies are beautiful, and it's just the perfect day. And then the clouds roll in, but instead of raining down water, it rains down crystal needles about the size of your thumb. And during this initial downpour, 8,000 people across Boulder and Denver are caught outside, and they die. And it becomes this beautiful apocalyptic love story about love and loss and how we move on and how we deal with grief. And so I started with Lock and Key, and I got to the stage where I could actually adapt one of Joe's stories to a comic. So that is a very, very long answer to your very short question, how I got into comics.
No, I love it. And I like, we talked a little bit off recording about your love for Stephen King too. And obviously that probably means a lot to Joe Hill and that connection to Stephen King that a lot of people don't know, which is Joe Hill is his son. And so,
Sure.
The cool story hearing it that you got into comic books basically into the comic books as we know them, then writing something with and along the side someone who you got into it is a dream come true if you think about it in that sense. But you've also gone on obviously to write other pretty noticeable works like Canto, and obviously what we're talking about here with Specs, which is pretty cool. But like, it's funny how you went into Comic-Con or San Diego Comic-Con, as everybody knows it, to talk about or to do the TV and film thing, which is the kind of thing that people hate hearing, which is it's pretty much what it is nowadays. Like there is a comic aspect to it, and I love the comic aspect to it, but let's be honest, like we know as fans of the genre, waiting for those big announcements from Marvel, DC, independent things for the film and TV side of things, that comic book news does come out of it, but it's usually the secondary thing to a lot of people's news worthy things.
And that's absolutely right. And I had such a journey with San Diego Comic-Con that now I don't really I see and I absorb the news that's coming out, but I don't really pay attention to it. So it's kind of been like these three stages of Comic-Con for me. It's the first stage was going for TV and film and waiting in that Hall H line and really just absorbing the non-comics pop culture aspect of it. And then there was the middle part of my journey. This is like a full adventure. The middle part of my journey was going for comics, still kind of into the TV and film, but looking at comics and reading them and seeing and getting familiar with the landscape and catching up on things like Watchmen and Dark Knight and Infinity Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths. Is that what it? Yeah. Well, and then the Infinity Crisis is the Marvel.
It's the word infinity and crisis and all that stuff. They just like to interchange those things over like, Marvel and DC.
It's just going to be an infinity of me trying to describe each one of them accurately. Yeah, and so going back and reading all of those, like even like Mouse and Mouse Guard, and just all of these things that I had not experience. But that was my middle part of my journey, and the end part of my journey is very different from the first two, which is I don't go to the con for TV or film at all anymore. I'm barely exposed to that unless I'm involved with it. And then even the comic side of things, it's hard to keep up with because I'm there and I have an itinerary, and it's now a job. It's now work to go there and hit everything. And by the time I'm done with doing signings and panels and everything else, meetings, all those obligations, it's all I want to do is go out in the gas lamp and have a beer.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting evolution for me. And I have a very close friend of mine who I've gone to every single Comic-Con with. It's like we're each other's wing people, if you will. And she always goes for the TV and film, and she stays in the Hall H line, and she just really hits it hard on the TV and film side because she also is a podcaster, and so she wants to have all this information to be able to disseminate it. And seeing my evolution of my experience with her steadiness of always having this, she knows what she's going to do, and she's got it down, is really it's been such a fun journey, such a fun adventure, treasure hunt.
Treasure hunt.
Full circle.
Well, it's like nowadays, you're hoping and not hoping, but if it happens, things like Canto being adapted, you're ready to go for comic books now and television, but working on both sides of that, or television or movies, I should say, and hoping that some of these books maybe eventually do end up like Lock and Key on the screen and going there and doing signings, not only for your comic books, but also maybe having a panel about talking about an adaptation.
Getting into that Hall H, my friend, that's like, you talk about working with Joe Hill's a career check mark. Getting on a panel in Hall H would be just.
Don't worry, it's only time. It's a matter of time there.
I that's like a mantra of mine, Justin. It's a matter of time because you have to have that mindset.
Yeah.
Because the things that I've been able to do, we just announced that I'm doing Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning cartoons at IDW. And it's like I loved that cartoon when I was a kid. Loved it. And the idea that I get to now be part of that world, like you just have to manifest it and work toward it and hopefully get a little lucky and you can be there. But that's why Hall H is such a lofty goal, but I'm manifesting it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm good buddies with Ben Bishop, who is on the Last Ronin, and he same thing, being a huge Turtles fan as growing up as a kid and doing that, and then drawing his own work and doing that, working alongside Kevin Eastman now, to now having panels that he discusses things over at San Diego Comic Con. I mean, Hall H. Yeah,
are you a Turtle Pit fan?
Yeah.
Can I grab something off my shelf?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I got so many. I do this at every podcast that I probably shouldn't, but my shelf, it's like all my cool stuff.
It's all the way over there.
But wait a minute. Let me get it. All right. So backstory.
Okay.
I went down recently to a signing for Ninja Funk, which is a Whatnot book. And Kevin was there because he did some covers for them. And I found this at a flea market a while back. And I brought it to him and we had a wonderful time. For him, it's like an old bank from Mexican bootleg bank.
Yeah.
And he was such a good sport that he signed it and remarked it.
That's awesome.
So
I mean, it looks heavy.
It's like plaster.
Okay.
It's kind of tall. It's like 2 feet tall. But he's such a good guy that we had such a fun time just chatting about this. He had a story about it, of course, because he has stories about everything. And then Ben and I are he's done a couple of covers for us.
Yeah.
For Canto, and just wonderful. And it's like you say, seeing that baby Ben picture, that photo of him next to he's next to a turtle, I think.
Yeah.
And then having him do what he does now on Last Ronin, it's just I'm so happy for him because it's like all of his dreams are coming true.
Oh, absolutely. And there's things that he just same thing. It's like he just gets to do these things that he never thought he would ever be able to do. And his fan club is in the hundreds now. of like monthly people paying for him
of
to like
subscriptions.
Yes, it's insane.
Bish boxes. It's crazy.
I got a couple of them here somewhere.
We talk about this, but also not to overlook the fact that he has worked
yes,
incredibly hard. You have the dream, and then you have to have the work ethic and to get to that point. And then you also have to just continually silence that voice of self-doubt that stops you from getting to making your dreams come true. And you just got to buckle down, and you just got to do it. And it's still a work in progress.
And I always, though, every time I bring him up on the podcast, I always say he still has Aggregate 2, which is his creator-owned title that he needs to actually finish. So I always call him out as a joke, because obviously we know he's a busy man, and he just having a baby this year, so he just bought a house. So like he's got a lot going on in his life. But we all, as Aggregate fans too, we need to have Aggregate
demand
2.
It.
Let's go.
We demand
Come on.
We demand it, Ben. Put your baby aside. Put your house aside. Put Jill aside and give it to us now.
Tell Kevin he can wait on drawing blood. No, I was kidding.
Just shush him. Just put a pin in his face.
Just shush Kevin.
Slowly push him away in the face. All right.
It's just yeah. And so like it's like great to see people you respect. And the same thing, both Ben, a Maine person where I'm from, Kevin, New England based person right there. He's started the Turtles in New England as well. And so those things are huge. And we talked about Stephen King. So we got a lot of good creators.
I got to come out of
these places.
Visit all of you.
I wanted to say this before we recorded. I've talked about it before with other people on the podcast, but a couple of months ago, talking about Stephen King, I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw Stephen King's house come up on Instagram, and a square picture of Stephen King's house with someone standing in front of it. And it's a very common thing on his road. The road's extra wide, honestly. So like, it's not, I don't think it's for that. It's just, there's expensive houses on that road. So there's like extra space on the road. Cars are usually stop on the side of the road, taking pictures in front of his house. And it's not just a simple house. It's not like when you're going to someone's house and it's like, it's a nice elaborate house. It has like bats and
beautiful
and
Victorian.
Yes.
And then the wrought iron fence out front is topped with bats. And so it's a great photo op.
And I'm like looking, I'm like, who is that? And it was Charles Soule. And I was like, interesting. What was he doing in Bangor, Maine? We're in it's a pretty random spot. If anybody doesn't know Maine, we're there's an international airport here, but it's not the kind of international airport where you like drive up and like wait in line for your, flight there. Right. It's like you drop someone off at the front door and you're back to work after you dropped your friend off in 10 minutes. It's a small international airport. And so what is he doing up here? And so come to find out, he was just visiting, trying to find some first editions of Stephen King's books in the area. He wanted to visit the house, and he stopped by my LCS, my buddy's shop in Bangor, and signed some comic books. It's called Galactic Comics and Collectibles. Sure. There's one of only 2 or 3 in the area, but his shop he stopped by there, signed some books. One of his workers is now a huge curse words and 8 billion genies fan because of this. But it was just kind of funny. I was like, I wonder how much often that happens, that just like random people stop by. Like how we had like Justin Bieber like stop by and take a picture in front of Stephen King's house. We just don't know because I don't follow him on social media. Like it probably happens way more than we thought. And so that's why we got to get you up here, and so you could take a picture in front of it randomly.
Justin Bieber, me and Justin Bieber together
next to each other.
Stephen King's house.
But
that would be like Bizarro Worlds.
We had
it's a dartboard of what are the 3 most different things that we could bring together.
We had a number of the losers from the 1990 thing at our local Comic-Con came up, and they all took a picture in front of it, which was really cool too, because a lot of them hadn't been here. And so it was like kind of cool because obviously it wasn't filmed here, but
Tim Curry
was not able to make it, but it was Brandon Crane and Ben Heller, who actually will be guests on the podcast, come up here in February to talk about their trip.
What?
And then I forget, there was like 3 or 4 other ones. And actually, I don't know if you can see it here, but this right here is a We All Float beer can label. So my day job is I'm a creative director for a brewery. And so we did this beer called We All Float with a local brewery called Marsh Island Brewing Company. But yeah, that's all signed by them too.
My gosh. You better, as soon as this podcast is over, you better mail me some of that beer. You can empty out the cans.
No, I have extra labels. I have posters too we made for it too. But the only one that couldn't come was Seth Green. He's too big, honestly, and obviously we sadly one of them passed. And so there was only five out of the seven losers.
Seth Green
wasn't able to make it. He did not come, but everybody else did.
Who was he in the original?
Seth Green was original? He was I forget his name now. I'm gonna look it up now. Yeah, he was in the original one. He was one of his first movies.
Really?
It was like not one of his first movies. Yeah, 1990 was. Let's see. He started acting in 1984.
Oh yeah, he was Richie. He's Richie Tozier.
Yeah, right, young Richie Tozier.
I did not. You just educated me right this second.
Well, I mean, he's the only one out of all of them that really, really, really went on to. No offense to all of them.
For the kids.
That really went on to do something big. I mean, Seth is like a name that people know and forget, like you just did, that he was even on the special. Whereas all the other people, like that's what they're known for. They go to cons now and like, I'm part of the Losers Club.
And Bill, unfortunately, is no longer with us.
No with us anymore. But they were able to get all that, and they actually got now I'm gonna forget his name. Bart Mixon, who did the special effects on the movie, and then a friend of the podcast, John Capapiano, did a documentary called Pennywise. It was about the making of the movie, and he was here with a couple of Tim Curry's suits from the original thing too. Which was cool. It was a whole thing. It was really cool. It was a whole like Derry, Maine kind of thing.
That's Tim Curry as Pennywise, just terrified. And I was when it came out in 1990, right? It was I was 11 years old, and I watched it. I was probably way too young to watch it, but Tim Curry's Pennywise just horrified me. And I loved the 2017, the new one. Loved it, but I always have a soft spot for that 2-part miniseries that I watched with commercials on cable when I was a kid.
Check that documentary out. It's amazing. It's on Screenbox, but I believe you can watch it on Amazon streaming as well, or you get a free trial on it. But it's by John Campapiano. He did this, like he talked to Tim and a bunch of the losers and a bunch of the people from the first movie, and just talked about how crazy it was to be made for TV. If you think about like that as a Stephen King adaptation, making it for like national television. It's weird back in 1990, whereas nowadays with Netflix and HBO and all those things, it wouldn't be as surprising because you can do whatever you want. But for like network television to have a horror TV series like this on was crazy.
It was, I mean, back then there were so many of them. The Stand was a 2-part miniseries. The Langoliers was a 2-part miniseries. So the Stephen King especially, they loved doing those early miniseries where they would air them on TV. And I guess you're right that streaming is kind of like the broadcast miniseries now. Yeah.
And you can do what you want. Like you can be I mean, one of the clips was originally supposed to be someone carrying Georgie to the front door with his mom, like it's like a limp body. Like a limp body, and they're like, you can't do that on national television. I'm sorry, that is too emotional and too graphic to put on national television. So you're gonna have to cut that scene out. But if you think about watching those movies and things like that, it's actually was pushing the boundaries pretty far on some of those things to be on TV, which is pretty cool. But Stephen King is as a legend around here for sure, and so we always try to have these kind of connections. That's why the It thing happened and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool to have that. I would love for Joe to come up too, because Joe is he's gotten more into the industry that we like the comic books and those kind of things too, with Lock and Key. And I absolutely love Basket Full of Heads. Was amazing.
Oh yeah,
that was a great series as well.
I have it right behind me, right there. My Joe Hill.
But we're like, we got treasure hunting down. We got what was your interior design? Got Stephen King checked off the list now. So we're just rolling along here.
That's it. We probably should talk about specs, right? Yes. At some point.
I was just gonna bring that up. So specs. First of all, I originally didn't read Canto, so I'll admit that to you right now. I did pick up Rain.
Get out of here just right now.
Rain I did pick up because, again, the whole and think it wasn't even because I didn't read Canto and a couple other things, I didn't really know much about the other creative part of that team, but I bid it up because of Joe Hill. So, but you'll give me credit for that. That's fine, right? I can
half credit.
But Specs, one of those things. I think some of it's your artists that are connected to this project because of, I mean, you know this even as a writer, the artists make you look at the book at the front, like when you will see it on the shelf at your LCS,
right,
or in solicitations or things like that, and
right.
that the name Specs, the logo that was worked out for that, and then the glasses on that first cover you have there, which is mine's over there.
This
yes,
this
the
is
skull and
Skylar
everything.
Patridge. This is Skylar Patridge, and as soon as this cover came in, I thought, you know what, this comic, if I had no association and knew nothing about it, I would buy this copy. I would buy this issue.
It just
check
drew me right in, and then obviously
Mhm.
and then you read the solicitation for it. I'm like, oh, you've sold me on this. I
Right.
I want to say I love the fact that these kids can think that a book from years and years and years ago that they'd even contemplate the idea of being able to send out for the thing. Like, all I can think of is like a comic book.
Didn't
Like,
you as a kid were like,
but
wouldn't that be cool if we could call this number?
we could, but like I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if it's just my adult mind saying like, but this book's 30 years old. There's no way this offer is still available.
It is, because as a kid, I remember looking at old stuff and being like, I wonder if you could get this still. And even today, like, ooh, here's a comic book from 1990 and Marvel is offering something to get a mail away. I was like, well, I wonder if you could do that. So I think Marvel should actually do that. Somebody suggested it.
Yeah.
Go back to old, like 1980,
Yeah.
Copper Age books, find a PO box that they used,
and
they do like something special. If anybody nowadays were to send something over, they'd send something back. That would totally go viral, I think.
Yes.
People would go crazy.
I want to say, is it right on comic book, comic series, comics? The book Revival by Tim Seeley over at Image. It's a book, whatever. That's not the part of the story that it really matters, is that inside one of the things was like, find out more by going to like revivalcomic.com or something like that. And I was like, oh, the book came out in 2013. And so I went to the website and it went nowhere. Someone didn't renew it at some point. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I bought it and redirected it to the podcast.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was $10. I was like, oh my gosh, this is funny. And that's what made me think of it when I was reading Specs, was the fact that some of these ads, like the phone numbers, are probably not even active anymore for these ads that potentially were available back
not
then.
At all.
And the web, even web address nowadays. Yes.
We made them up, but yes, if you picked up a Silver Age or Bronze Age comic and you tried to go down that rabbit hole, it's all defunct now because it's all websites. But yeah, so it was I was channeling a lot of my own childhood with Specs and my love of everything 80s, and then my love of Stephen King. It's kind of a mix between like Stand By Me and Creepshow and Amazing Stories. It's not quite as gory as Creepshow is. So if you wanted contemporary reference, I really categorize, or I really picture it as an episode of Cabinet of Curiosities, if you've ever seen that show.
Yep.
Do you know how when Guillermo del Toro goes to the cabinet and he talks about the episode and he opens the cabinet? I totally could see him taking out a pair of the Specs and putting it on the table next to the carved totem of the director. And that's the episode. Is what happens to these kids with these magic Specs.
100%. I would also Joseph Smolke, another main artist creator, has a book that has a similarity to that. Now I said it. I'm gonna.
Is it We Don't Kill Spiders?
No, it's.
How dare you?
The Electric Black
podcast. How dare you leave the podcast to go pick something off of your shelf?
Well, so it's right here and it's in the spot. It's hard to get.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
exactly
being sarcastic.
It's called The Electric Black, and it's a similar thing to that Cabinet of Curiosities thing, where you walk into this like vintage pawn shop and people always ask questions about these like antique items, and he picks up the item and then they go into the story about what the item has to do with whatever.
Cool. So it's like an anthology type series.
Yes, and he wrote it, but you can't buy it except for like on Amazon or something like that now, because it was at Scout and he's no longer with Scout anymore. And it was a whole thing. But like, that's a similar idea, but I could totally see this too as being a 4-issue series. You could crush it down into a single issue story or episode, but I do like the idea that it's 4 issues because it gives you a little bit more meat to the bones.
Yeah, and a lot of these 4-issue series that I work on, like Killer Queens and then Specs, I really conceptualize them as there's two ways I adapt my own work to TV and film. And there's two approaches to adapting. You can either take 4 issues and really blow that out to a full-blown series or a full-blown movie, or you can take it and you can condense it down and treat it as the episode, as the first episode. So if Specs were to go to TV as its own standalone thing, I would more visualize this as an episode. And the show is really about the magic specs. And you'll see by the end of the 4 issues, we get a little bit more of an idea of what they are, what their true nature is, especially after this 3rd issue and then the 4th issue where we end. So you get a better idea of what the nature of these classes are. And it's such that I don't want to give anything away, but it's just not, I'll say little, it's a little tiny spoiler, but not bad.
Yeah.
But these are not the first people who have been cursed by these magic specs, nor will they be the last. So it's a magical cursed object that just, wreaks havoc and continues to wreak havoc and just moves on to the next unwitting victim. So
and I have been able to read issue 3. Boom sent that out on Friday, so I have been able to read that one. So I see where you're coming from on that. And I mean, when they just show up at your back door without actually ordering them, or front door without actually ordering, you think that there's something bigger to it than there is anyway. But
right. Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different paths to take as far as what did somebody curse them? Is there some bigger badder thing behind them? And I didn't really ever want to. I always wanted to keep it as grounded as possible when you're dealing with the story about magic wish granting glasses. So obviously you can't keep it that grounded. So it's more of a magical realism where it's all, and that's what I love about Stephen King's best work to me, and Joe Hill's best work to me, are these things that are grounded in reality and character. And Stephen King has this way of taking just ordinary people and putting them into these extraordinarily horrific situations and having them find their way out. And so that's what I wanted to channel with Specs, was this idea that these are 2 kids who are struggling with their own issues and they're trying to get through high school. And it's 1987. It's a rough time for anybody, and these 2 in particular in this particular town. And then you throw in this, this cherry bomb of magical glasses, and suddenly it just shines a spotlight. It just emphasizes all the problems that these 2 kids have been facing. So that's my approach. And if and when we get a sequel to it, I already have an idea for it, and it's going to be a similar type of thing, but dealing with different issues.
Well, it's one of the big things I love about comic books nowadays is when you looked at my top 10 for the year, which was normal life, quote unquote, like it could happen for real with one small thing that just sends it into the fiction of it. Like, it's like if you read most of this book and you take the specs out of the whole thing, it's just a slice of life from 1987 with these boys who are dealing with issues of being in high school. They're trying to find out their own identity, bullies, racism, all that in one little thing. And then you add in the specs and it just throws it into this, okay, this is definitely fiction. And that's what I love about some of these things in that Stephen King is. Well, is it based on real life? Do you have the specs? Do you have them at your house?
Is it though?
Those look a little bit cheaper than the ones you see in the book.
Okay, well, I see your where the heck are they? Oh man, I have a pair of magic specs. I don't have them handy out here, but I did make a. Do you want me to grab them? They're on the other side of the room.
If you want to.
I want to go ahead.
Go grab them.
I'm a nerd.
That's like you want to.
Nerd. I'm such a nerd. So yeah, I went all out on these promotional I made my own magic specs.
Oh, where did you just cut? Did you make a bunch of them up, or is that the only one?
Well, I had like 30 and I sold them.
Okay.
But yeah,
that's awesome.
This is Chris Sheehan did
Okay,
the design on it. And yeah, so I wanted it to look like a pair of, or like you'd find it like a gag shop.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
I'm gonna do the rest of the podcast in my magic glasses.
Like, I feel like, what is going on?
Justin's like, let me have them, and so I can.
Oh yeah, I know
this is over.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like the other thing I love about it, and the one thing I loved about the whole thing was, and a big thing, excuse me, that I wrote in my issue 1 review, which was, it's funny how much we would always think about the wishes we would make, but it's like the big things that I never thought about. Honestly, you made me think about this, was the wishes that you don't make are actually what could be more important, more realistic, or more have more effect on your life. The decisions you make not to make that wish. And obviously your characters in the comic book deal with that in the first issue of what they really want to wish for, what they should wish for is a different thing. And that's, we just talked about Charles Soule, and he has a book obviously that has some currently doing things about wishes.
Few more wishes.
But if you want to read specs and then read what would happen if you made all the wishes that you shouldn't make, then go over and read 8 Billion Genies after.
Yeah, and I think making wishes is always about. It's always about. Everybody thinks, oh, what would I wish for?
Yeah,
what would I wish for? And the reality is, it's every story about wishes is the consequences of making wishes. And so I wanted Specs to be about one wish and the struggle about whether or not I should make it. I know that's what I want, but is it really what I want?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we'll find out in issue 4.
Yeah, exactly. Is it done? Are you done with issue 4? Is it ready to go? Or are you still ready? Okay, good. Yeah. I know it's a month away from the actual the release of the 4th issue. So
yeah, so I usually, my writing process is usually a rolling basis. So I have the I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, but I have the exciting responsibility of managing my time. So I'll do an issue, I'll finish an issue of a script, and I'll have to move on to something different. And then I've got the next deadline for that. And so it's kind of a rolling basis. I would love to have, I sort of look back on the time when I could just sit down and write like 4 or 5 or 6 issues, just back to back to back to back to back. And I might go back to that. I might, because it feels like a lot right now, big, heavy workload, and to be able to focus on single projects is nice.
Yeah. Is there, I like to ask this people question nowadays, with the number of publishers, number of books out there, is there a reason why it landed at Boom? Is this like you like the relationship you have with Boom?
Well, I wrote All New Firefly for Boom, so that was a nice long run that I got to do with them, and it was a really good experience. And the Specs actually started as a one-shot that was going to go into an anthology, and the anthology, and it didn't end up working out in that anthology. And then it was set up at a different publisher for 3 issues. And for various reasons, we ended up moving on from that publisher. And then I approached Boom with my relationship with Firefly. And honestly, I was kind of surprised, because I felt like at the time when I pitched it to Boom, they were really focused on things like Berserker and Something is Killing the Children. And we only find them, I think we only find them when they're dead, is Boom as well. Just these big sci-fi, big horror, genre stories. And this is like a magical realism, kind of horror-y, supernatural slice of life thing. And I was really shocked when they came back and said, yeah, we want to do it as a 4 issue. But it's also exciting, because what you're reading in these 4 issues is so much deeper and more exploratory of these characters and this story than I would have ever been able to do as a single issue, even 3 issues. And then the horror part of it, the supernatural horror part of it, really was something that grew organically. So it turned into less of a amazing story and more of a creep show cabinet of curiosities as we developed it into 4 issues.
Yeah, and I mean, it came out so far. Like I said, I've been lucky enough to have the 3 issues. Boom usually sends out your the advanced PDFs for review on Friday, or usually it's Friday. Sometimes it's Monday. But I had
Yeah,
emailed the marketing department and was like, "Hey, I have David
good,
on Monday. Is it possible for me to get?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'll send it right over to you now." So that was nice to
good.
have that, because I'm like, I want to be able to. I mean, selfishly, I just wanted to read it, but I was
Uh-huh.
like, I could have just made it up and been like, "Oh yeah, David's on Monday. Don't worry about it. I want to read it." And it's nice to have that. And Boom's their whole department, their whole team over there seems like they just know what they're doing, which is very happy. And
Right.
I listened to a podcast on the Off Panel podcast with Liana Kangas talking about Know Your Station, and they were talking about how great the departments work there at Boom is that you're like, they have marketing and they have design and all that stuff to help you with your book. So
Sure.
even though it's your project, there's still a lot of resources you can work with over at Boom. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And there was one moment when I just remember this funny exchange I had with my editor, Elizabeth Bray, and she's amazing. Because I'm very used to with Canto.
Mhm.
We created the art, we got the colors, we got the lettering, and we kind of turned it all over. And it was very much, we were very much overseeing the process.
Mhm.
And at Boom, I had to get out of that mindset a little bit, because I wouldn't hear anything, and then it'd come back and it's like the book's fully designed. I'm like, who did this and what? I I I don't have to worry about
Yeah.
production. What are you talking about? What kind of crazy world is this? So yeah, everybody works together, and it really gives the creators the opportunity to focus on doing their best work on the book, which I
And
really
I'll tell you,
like.
I'm as a creative director or as a graphic designer, I am always very, very, very not vocal out loud to a lot of bad logos recently on comic books. There's a couple of books to
But
me when I go to the
specs, no, I'm
but
just
specs
kidding.
is unbelievable. No, but when I go to the LCS on Wednesdays and I talk to my buddy, I'm like, there's just some that I'm like, who let this go by? Like, who at the company was like, yeah, this, and I'm talking big two books that I'm like, you don't have the money or the departments to say that someone goes, that's not that logo is not going to sell the book. And Specs is
Right.
one of those ones. And I was talking recently about some other books that are just like, there's something that, like I said, that cover art brings it in. It's like, obviously, once you look at the cover, you have to open the book up. Your interior art, colors, and your writing has to continue selling the book to you.
Hmm.
So you buy issue 2 and so on. But the first issue, when you look at that, you have to have some sort of thing that grabs you in. And sometimes, depending on where your LCS has them, sometimes the logo is what you see. Sometimes you have to
Right.
see the logo and then pull out the book and go, oh, the rest of this book looks beautiful as well. And I just, like
Sure.
I said, I'm not going to call it anybody in particular, but there's been some ones where I'm like, I'm not the greatest designer in the world, but I could have done that in paint and been better than that. And there's some like Specs. I think it's, you could have gone too far into the using glasses
Oh yeah.
as, you know what I mean? Like, you could have gone cheesy with the glasses being something with it, but the Specs, I don't know, it just sold it. And then obviously the colors, the greens and the reds,
Yeah.
is it's so beautiful on the front of that. So your art department's great. The writing's amazing, I'll tell you that much. But your art department, your
Oh,
art people are great.
Justin. Well,
I tell
thanks
you
for
what,
throwing
I
that
I
in.
know writing's good when you finish the last page of the book and you're like, oh crap, this is over, because you
I
don't
know.
struggle through it. And that's the one thing I will say. I was like, I got done
Okay.
with issue 3 the other night, and I was like, oh man, I have to wait
Well,
a
it
month
turns
to
out
get issue
that
4.
yeah, so it's really there's a lot of narration in
Yeah.
this series, and to balance the how much narration you need and then having it be over explaining. So there's a chunk of issue 3 which I had some narration. There's those pages at the beginning where there isn't any dialogue or
Yeah.
anything. It's just watching them. And if it were a movie, nobody would think twice about there being no dialogue, right? Um, or no narration. I
Yeah.
had narration in there, and we opted
Yeah.
editorially to just let it sort of flow. And I think it's really cool because when you do get that first line of narration after that, it's kind of like, do you remember what the line is?
I not off the top of my head now.
Well, how dare you? No, I'm just kidding. No, it was a line of I think it was, the narration was, what did I expect to find?
Yeah.
and it's after all these silent pages, and it's cool because it comes in and it almost, to me, when I look at it, suggests that there has been this conversation with the reader throughout these silent pages, and then you come right in. Are you looking at it right now?
I'm looking at it right now. I'm just trying to figure out where it is. There's
it's after the bus.
Yeah. It is hello. Oh, and then so hello, and then it says, "What did I hope to find?"
Don't say anything more than that.
Yeah, I'm not going to, but obviously not.
What did I hope to find?
Yes.
And it's you just come right into the middle of it, and it's like there has been all of that narration leading up to that point, and you don't need it. So that was one thing that I learned, an interesting little lesson that I learned as a writer is you just got to really, if you're doing narration, you just got to really figure out when you need it, when you don't.
And if you have great art team, you could rely on the fact that they're going to be able to portray it in a way in those panels. And I explained to my buddy last week, the guy who owns the comic book shop, Paul, we did our top 10 comic books of the year. And we talked about how there's some books that are just so well written and drawn that you experience the book. Whereas sometimes I find myself when there's a lot of speech bubbles and a lot of narration in it, you tend to just read it. And it's like, well, then why didn't this just be a novel in the first place? Like, right. If the artwork doesn't matter. And so when you have these boxes that don't have anything in it, it almost forces you to pay attention to the artwork.
That's so funny that you say that, because that's one of the techniques that I'm talking to folks about, how, who are just starting out with comics. And one of the techniques that I tell them is I find myself skipping over art if there's, a lot of dialogue or a lot of narration. And so one of the techniques that you can use as a writer is to eliminate the words, force the reader to take the time on the art. And then the flip side is also true. If you want the reader to focus on something that you're saying, you can really minimize the art in a particular panel.
Yeah.
Not that you always want to do that, but there might be a moment when you don't need the background. You need profile, half a face who's talking, and then that's a moment. Or it's a full page spread, and you just have, it was an X-Men page where the figures are at the bottom, and it's just the dialogue is just sort of coming down the page. And that's the moment when the reader stops and like absorbs everything there. So it's pulling the levers in different ways when you're making comics.
Yes.
To think about how the reader is going to pace their way through it.
And I think that your relation to you saying it about like a movie and having if this is a movie or a TV show, you wouldn't have any narration, just watching these people do these things. I think nowadays too, some people are just so getting into comic books after watching TV and film and relating a comic book to a TV show in a sense that, like, how do you read this book like you'd watch an episode of television is really cool, because it makes it an easier transition for some people. So reading issue 3, for an example, for some people might be really an easy issue to read, because they're just they take it in like a movie or a TV show, which is pretty cool.
And that's also yet another technique when you're writing and you're creating comics is, that you already have this shared language with every single person who picks up this comic book is going to have watched TV and film and movies. So if you can rely on the pre-existing language that you both share and translate that down to panels and pages, I find myself, I almost have to fight against it, because I find myself almost always opening, especially like first issue, with close shots, shot of the IV bag dripping, and then the hands holding each other, and then the shot of the news on the TV in the corner of the hospital room, and just a bunch of those close-ups, and then you turn the page and it's like the full page spread of everybody in the hospital room, and here's the moment. And I may or may not have written that exact thing for a new project, but I think it works there. But I do find myself going, there's a lot of different ways to tell stories in comics, and you don't always have to rely on filming techniques to convey that story.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, I think the coolest thing is you have a book like this. Like I said, I like the benefit of running your own podcast and doing this too is I tend to not bring people on that can't do the industry well. Like there's definitely people who have reached out to us. Yeah, so there's definitely people who have reached out, and I'm my buddy. I used to have a co-host who moved away and things just didn't work out, but he we got an advanced
Specs,
copy. We got an advanced copy of a book this one time. We've had it multiple times since then. This is one of the first ones. And I was just gung-ho about reading it. So I was like, cool. When I scheduled an actual episode and I was working on it and so on and so forth. And the episode ended up falling apart because of other scheduling issues. But after we actually read the book, we're like, were we really going to have this person on the podcast? Because the book, I couldn't get through the book. And so the benefit I have to having people on is I enjoy the books that I'm getting people on. I'm not just bringing people on because we got to fill a time slot. So I read the first issue of Specs and then I reached out and said, we need to get you on the podcast because I really enjoyed it. And so you did a really good job with Specs and I'm excited. And like I said, then I have to go back and now, not now, I had to go back and read Canto and things like that so that I could get an idea.
Did you read it?
I read some of it.
The first
but not,
one?
Yes, not all of it yet. But
I'm making you so. I love this. I'm making you so uncomfortable.
No,
it's good. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's the same thing I'm going to explain now. And when we have Daniel Krause on, we talked about, I remember recording with him for next week or the week after that is I read the first chapter of The Living Dead he did with George Romero. And I got to the point where I'm like, I don't have time to read this massive book right now. So I have a sense of what it's like, but I don't have the actual full book. And but I have read his comic book, so I'm okay with that. We're gonna.
Well, Justin, I certainly don't have an enormous to be read pile right off camera, so
yes.
I can't relate to you, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's like one of the best things about talking to comic book creators is the fact that if you have a 4-issue series, I can get that done tonight. I can read it all and get an idea of what's going on. If I've talked to authors before and I've like, oh my God, I have to read this book now. I don't have time for that.
Then I guess you don't want to hear about my 24 issue, 40 page per issue series that's coming out. Can you imagine?
I don't understand how
I'd be like
Matthew Rosenberg and Tyler Boss's What's the Furthest Place from Here? Those are all 50-page issues. And I'm like, I don't understand. And he's like, I had to cut it out. I just cut him down. I'm like, what are you doing to yourself?
Yeah, I don't.
It's really good.
20 pages is rough. 20 pages sometimes can be tough to get everything in there.
Correct.
So you really have to design the story to fit 20-page issues. But that being said, if I become wildly successful beyond even your wildest dreams, Justin.
Yes.
I know you dream big for me.
I am.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, if I become wildly successful and get to be a recluse for a year, I guess I could do whatever I wanted at that point. But for right now, 40-page single issues or 50-page single issues are not in the cards.
No.
Maybe
we'll days. But you have Specs came out. It's 2 issues are out. Third issue actually this comes out Wednesday, which is the day that the third issue comes out. So you can grab that at your local comic book shop, whoever hasn't purchased it. And again, like we mentioned they might be sold out, but you can find your way.
You can get them digitally. You can get download. You can get them digitally on Comixology. That first issue, if you do find it out there, just go ahead and grab a copy because I personally am having trouble finding them for my own personal collection, and most of mine are gone. So grab those copies. I have a sense that it will be a nice thing to have in your collection.
And then there's a bunch of cool variants. Yes, exactly. Variants out there too. Grab those variants from people as well. Those are pretty cool. Do you have a say in any of that? Who gets to do the variants, or is that a Boom thing? Or
Boom takes care of all the covers. They'll send me covers to show me what they are. I suggested all the B covers are done by David Tulaski, including that absolutely haunting, my favorite cover of the whole series. That 1 in 10 incentive cover for issue number 3 just is so incredible, of atmospheric, dread, terror. It's just wonderful. So I suggested David Tulaski do all of the B covers because I think he's amazing, and those have been fantastic. But Boom does handle the cover approach.
Well, that's great, and that's a great statement there to say that you suggested this, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, if we find some other people to do some other ones, we'll do that, but we'll obviously do the 1 in 10. It is a beautiful cover. It's a very eerie cover.
It's
Very
so spooky, right?
Yes,
I don't know how he was able to do that. It's like the light source is from the reader, so it's like a car is coming, maybe, or some. I don't know what it is. And then the shadow figures in the background. It's just
just the eyes having the dots in the eyes, or it's just
yeah. And then Kenny wearing the glasses, just chef's kiss.
Yeah, exactly. But issue 4 comes out in February, and then I just doing some research online. Looks like summertime for a trade.
I think so. Summertime or early fall. Yeah, and then if and when we ever get to jump back into the world of the Magic Specs, I'll let you know. Specs 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yes, Specs 2. Well, you should have called this one Spec, and then the next one could have been Specs, like Alien and Aliens.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Or you can go the opposite.
Because then it would totally get trolled by the speculator market.
Yes,
literally, people. I named the comic Spec.
Yes,
so that you will buy it.
Well, it's a pain in the ass to Google, honestly, because if you type in like Specs comic, it probably comes up with speculation comic books instead of, But hey,
I mean, you just got to get big enough to push out all the noise, don't you?
Exactly. Well, it's like there's other ones that are. I mean, there are some like The Recount by Jonathan Hedrick. That's also sucks. This is a website called The Recount, which is like a political website. And then it's like, okay, this is really hard to find this book. So you have to type in like Scout
Recount comic.
Yes. But you'll find it out there. So, but Specs is great. Obviously, Kanto, Killer Queens is out there. What else did I write down that you made? Rain, all new Firefly.
All new Firefly.
Grab that
D&D, Dungeons and Dragons is coming out in March, issue number 1. And then keep an eye out for some more cool stuff coming in 2023.
And D&D, where is that at again? You said
IDW.
Awesome. I love they're doing some good stuff over there now too. I've talked to a number of people now recently about some of their creator driven comic books,
those originals.
The IDW originals. I honestly think it was kind of funny how it fell into that place. I think they've had like 7 or 8 come out, and I think 4 to 6 of them are going to be guests on the podcast or have been guests on the podcast. Just so happens. But yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. And then Boom is doing excellent. Every time I see a Boom book now, I'm like, I've got to at least look into this book because I feel like they're putting out some great stuff too. So
somebody tweeted about the releases for Wednesday I think this is airing on Wednesday. So for today, and then the 4 Boom books that were coming out were the Specs number 3, Know Your Station, I think is number 2 or number 3. Grim
number 7.
And Something's Killing the Children, like number 27 or something. 28. And they put all 4 of them together. And I love that Boom has so curated their line of comics that they just all feel like it's Blumhouse or it's, you know what I mean? It just feels so curated that this is Boom, signature Boom, all of these series.
And I'll tell you right now, we're here to promote Specs, but Know Your Station is first issue was amazing. Obviously, we don't have to tout Something's Killing the Children. I think people already know about that book. And honestly, Grimm showed up on that top 10 list of the year for me personally. So I like Grimm over there too. Stephanie Phillips is doing a great job writing that book as well. But yeah, David Booher on Twitter. If you're still over there, I don't know that.
Yes,
that dumpster fire. You're nasty. Over there.
If you're nasty.
And then,
do you want to get your face burned off? Yeah.
Is it David M. Booher on Instagram?
Yeah.
And you're on Whatnot. You have a Whatnot pop-up on the day this comes out. It's night, the 7 p.m.
No? Yeah, it's 7 p.m. Eastern. It's 4 p.m. Pacific. And I sure hope that I have some issue number 3 copies in my hands on that day. If not, I'm going to go live. I still have some issue number 1s. But my handle on Whatnot is @DavidBooher. And I am really focusing on Whatnot and Instagram as far as social media. And so, it's been fun to be on Whatnot and bring all my stuff, my books to folks signed, and you get little extra goodies in there and all kinds of stuff.
Whatnot's been crazy. It's an insane world of comic books and creations, and now that they're publishing books, it's a whole insane thing as well. But I know a number of creators who are doing it, and it's working out really well for them.
I think there's a niche. Yeah, there's a niche on Whatnot for creators that has nothing to do with really the speculation part of things or the collectability part of things. It's just breaking down the barriers between creator and reader or fan, and allowing it's like a con experience but curated. So you get everybody who's interested
Yep.
in your work into the room together, and then we just chat. And I offer up signed books, and everybody seems to really enjoy it. So I'm going to keep doing it as long as I have stuff to offer.
There's nothing wrong with anyways. All creators have all these different options nowadays to get their work out into people's hands. And I always say that, like, obviously you just mentioned you don't have many ones left, but I've always said to people, there's someone's like, oh, I found this on eBay for like $50. I'm like, did you check out the creator's website? Because the creator's website has it for 20, and you just gave someone else $30 when you could have given the money directly to the creator. So check that out, and check out Whatnot to find your books on there as well. You can go on eBay and all that stuff too, but like if you can get it from the creator, you're a small business.
Here's a Whatnot hack for you. I will almost always put up buy it now lots. So if you want like specs, the signed A I put up for $5 in my buy it now, and the buy it now goes live long before the show goes live. So you can come in and you can snipe these buy it now books before I go live. So it's something to keep in mind.
Do you sign all the books you sell and Whatnot, or is it an option on there?
I just offer everything signed. If anybody doesn't want something signed, then I just tell them to message me. But every book that I've written comes signed with a certificate of authenticity, and then when it shows up on your doorstep, you get a little extra, maybe a sticker, maybe a trading card. Who knows?
There you go. I just got a delivery today. I'm sure. Let's see if you're interested. So these.
What is that?
Are the gold foil covers from
Are you kidding me?
James Tynion, Nightmare Country, and then there's two Something Killing the
Children. Where'd you get them?
So it was a Substack thing. So I was I didn't get his first Substack subscription, but then I was like, oh, he's just putting out some cool stuff on there that I can't. So I did 2 or 3 first year subscriptions to Substack. Scotty Young was one of them, and he admitted at the end that he just didn't like the platform. He just didn't like doing it. And so, but at the end of it, he sent out 2 of these, which is the I Hate Fairyland exclusive foil ones through his website. Will never sell this. So Scotty Young is one of my favorite artists, but these are selling for eBay for like $300. And cool. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I'll do a couple more. And I did James Tynion. I did this one. I did Snyder. No, 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. So I'm a big Michael Del Mundo fan, and he's it's Michael Del Mundo, Jonathan Hickman, and now you're gonna put me on the spot here.
I'm just gonna sit here and wait.
It's Michael or a Jonathan, isn't it? It's Michael. I don't know.
Hickman,
Del Mundo, and man, this is bad. I should know this. Do you know who it is or no? You don't know.
I don't.
Oh, Mike Huddleston.
There you go.
But Del Mundo. But so he switched over to a different platform and stuff like that. So one of the offers was get a refund or get all last year's 6 issues of the books in gold foil. And so I said,
oh my God. That. Those are gorgeous.
This one right here, this
if you ever
Department of Truth,
that's like iconic.
And I honestly think it's so cool because how sometimes you sign books in like gold foil pens or gold pens. This would look sweet just in a black Sharpie on it, or a silver Sharpie but yeah,
I got red paint.
Cool. Yeah, there
red
you go.
Paint marker. That's awesome.
Enough about the creators. Specs. Find you on social media, David. Keep up the good work. Keep it going. Yes.
I'm wrapping this up after today's issue. We got one more issue left. If you anybody listening, if you want more specs, it always helps to reach out to the publisher and just say, or go on social media tagging Boom how much you love the series and want to see more of it, because I do have an idea percolating that would be a very cool thing to do for in the Spectraverse.
In Spectraverse, everything's a verse now, right? Everything's a verse. But yeah,
sure.
I'm excited. Like I said, it's one of those things I like 4-issue series because I feel like I'll always if you were to come up with a 4-issue series or 5-issue series, like I can buy 5 comic books. That's, $20. You can do that. It's easy commitment. Or if someone wants to trade weight, you can trade weight. But so when someone says an ongoing, I'm more apprehensive to pick up issue 1 because if I like it, then I'm stuck with it forever. But then I get into these 4-issue series and I'm like, why isn't this longer? I'm like, why does this have to end in February? But
I think 5 issues is the sweet spot. But
yes.
It's been in the back of my mind to think about an ongoing, because I get so many people who complain about, not complain, but just want more. Yeah. But not even like the 5-issue more. They want like monthly. They just want to follow these stories monthly, and it's a hard thing to do as a writer, but it could be really fun too.
So, but like I said, the 4 issues, it's easy. You can commit to it, and that's one of those things that I feel like when I'm a completionist as well. So if I got issues 1 and 2, then I had to buy 3 and 4, whether the book was good or not. So, do it. But luckily I am now waiting. And luckily I get the issues a couple of days before they come out. If it was like 3 or 4 weeks before they come out, I'd be so sad for waiting. I'd have to wait even longer for issue 4. But I'm excited for issue 4. So look at that. You got your specs on right there.
Yep.
You just sign over everybody the spec with gold foil
on the lens.
Gold, on the lens.
I did sign the card though.
Right there you go. Look at that. That's awesome.
All right, my friends.
We can wrap it up here. So we got our interior design covered on this podcast today. We've got National Treasure and Treasure Hunting, Stephen King, specs, Substack subscriptions,
specking,
specs, and nuts. With the whole nuts.
Just end it right there.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Get back to hitting your deadlines. I hope we don't make it so you don't hit any deadlines, because that would be really sad. But
thank you, Justin. I'll be handing over your email address to all of my editors as I send in my "this is late" emails. But I had a great time.
I'll get an email when you return to talk about your next book on the podcast. Like, sorry, I'm not allowed to anymore. My editor said no.
I've been barred from coming onto your podcast because the 1 hour is too many hours to come on. So
I always thank creators because yes, when you're having deadlines and things like that, you're taking time out of it. And then I hear people talk on podcasts. Like I just booked for March Liana Kangas, and she was talking on the podcast with David Harper from Off Panel about how she's so busy, and so I was like, oh, now I feel bad that I just took more time.
No,
I know.
Don't feel bad at all. Liana is the nicest person on the planet, and she would be happy to give you the time to come on and clean up the mess that I have made today. So,
well, we'll see if the following week's podcast with Daniel Krause if he can clean up some of it. So we'll see how that works. Thanks a lot, David. I really appreciate it.
Cycle of the next one cleaning up for the last one. Done.
Never gonna be good.
Never.